Christopher Hell, former U.S. Ambassador to Iraq. Thank you for joining me on American Dialogues.
My pleasure.
Ambassador Hell, I want to start this interview by looking at the past. You arrived in Baghdad in 2009 at a critical moment, years before the US withdrawal, and at a time when Iran influence was expanding. Looking back now, what did Washington understand correctly about Iraq, and what did it fundamentally misunderstand?
Well, I arrived there at a time when I think we had 144,000 troops there. And I think the problem was that the administration, both the George W. Bush administration of several months before and the Obama administration, were thinking that we could kind of create a strategic dialogue, a strategic relationship based on troops who came there for a different purpose. They came there to invade the country, and I think we had a lot of problems in the sense that the Iraqis were not prepared to sign any kind of agreements, that is, in terms of the status of those forces. Um, and I think ultimately it was clear that President Obama felt the best way to handle it was to get all the forces out. If we then needed to put forces in at the invitation of the Iraqi government, that would be different than having forces come in because of an invasion. So he did that, and he did that to a lot of criticism in the U.S., but I think ultimately it was the right approach, and it was one that I supported from the day I got there. But I would say the conflicts we had were more among Americans than really with the Iraqis.
So you were tasked with helping Iraqis reach an agreement on forming a government. The stalemate lasted for months, and later you described that as your most formidable diplomatic challenge. What or who caused this difficulty?
Well, I mean, I think my job was, of course, to pursue American interests, and the interests, as explained by the president and our vice president, Joe Biden, who visited some 4 times during the time I was there, was to see if we could reduce our military footprint and turn the relationship with Iraq into a more normal relationship based on two civilian governments. Um, this was hard to do. This was very hard to do, and I think there was the military had grave concerns about leaving too soon. And at the meantime, we had problems kind of reaching understandings with the Iraqis on this. We had a prime minister there named Nouri al-Maliki, who was not always the easiest person to work with.
Why do you think he wasn't easy to work with?
Well, he had very tough ideas on things, and he was also getting ready for his own reelection. So, and I think he had really difficult relationships with the Sunni Arab states. I would say that the fundamental problem was in toppling Saddam Hussein, who, by the way, if you spend 10 minutes in Iraq, you do not regret that he was taken off the board. But in toppling Saddam Hussein, we did not realize that it would mean to set up a Shia-led government, and that Shia-led government would be looked at with great suspicion from
Mm.
the rest of the Sunni Arab world.
Did you think that the election of al-Maliki was better or worse than having Saddam Hussein in terms of US interests and in terms of
Well,
conquering Iran?
I think it was better. I think just about anybody is better than Saddam Hussein. He was an absolute killing machine, and I think he set Iraq back many decades. Um, he probably did not have nuclear weapons. I think we subsequently determined that, but he certainly had a belligerence to just about everybody, including his fellow citizens, and he had to go. So I don't rue the day that he was overthrown. The problem was to come up with a country that could work with its neighbors, that could keep its internal situation together. And I must say they did a decent job because last time I checked, it's the same external borders that it was when I got there. So, but it was very difficult, especially with an America that had increasingly determined that the invasion of Iraq had been a mistake.
Yeah. And there's still many in the Gulf and also in the US who think that the rise of al-Maliki and also the US withdrawal of forces from Iraq somehow are connected to the rise of the Iranian influence in Iraq. What do you think of that?
I think the Iran influence in Iraq was rather inevitable. Um, when you had an Iraq that was essentially shunned or isolated from the Sunni Arab states, that's changed, by the way. But at the time, the GCC was not friendly toward Iraq. GCC countries were not friendly to Iraq. And so the fact that Iran tried to play in this uh, field, that is, they showed a lot of mischief in playing in this field, including with the various militia groups, is something that maybe we should have given a little more thought to before we invaded in the first place. I must say, I had the very unpleasant experience of visiting a small town in south central Iraq called Nasiriyah, and there was a bomb that almost killed me. It came out of the side of the road and pile of garbage. It missed my car. It hit between the two cars, and it was some Shia group that was supported by Iran. So I have personal reason to feel very resentful of Iran's mischief in Iraq. Um, all that said, I think it was kind of inevitable and kind of obvious that this would happen.
Mhm. There are many, including former National Security Advisor John Bolton, who think that there was some kind of deliberate decision by President Obama to overlook the entry and growing intervention of the IRGC in Iraq. How do you describe the IRGC when you were in Iraq, their influence in the country?
Yeah, Mr. Bolton has the strength of his opinions on such matters tend to exceed his knowledge of such issues, and so I think the IRGC definitely a factor, but it was not something. It had nothing to do with Obama. It had to do with the fact that the Iraqi government was having a very difficult time getting internal unity. Uh, the Sunni the Sunni Iraqis regarded him with nothing but distrust and distaste, frankly, and the Kurds were barely on civil terms with him. So these were internal issues that I would emphasize were quite foreseeable. Uh, and the idea that after the American intervention, the idea that Iraq would have kind of normal political parties with kind of issues-based differences. One would want lower taxes, one would want higher taxes for social spending, whatever. The idea that that was going to happen is just a complete misreading of the situation. What was going to happen was there was going to be a very intense cooperation among various factions. There was going to be a reversion to kind of tribal influences. That happens when you don't trust the formal system. You retreat to other tribal loyalties, and all quite inevitable, frankly.
Yes. I'm trying honestly, like, to get the record right in terms of like when you were in Baghdad in 2009 until
Yeah.
2010, how visible was the IRGC and the Iranian activity in Iraq for you?
Well, it wasn't so visible to me, except when they tried to kill me in Nasiriyah. You tend to remember that incident. But I think what happened was in many areas, there had been some success against the Sunni extremism, in the form of the Sunni chieftains essentially rejecting Al Qaeda. But I think the further south you went, the stronger the Iranian influence was.
What
And I
was
don't think
the
we ever got rid of
president?
it.
What was President Obama' reaction to the attempt in your life in Iraq?
I don't remember any reaction except everyone was pleased that that my colleagues and I, and whose motorcade, we were all together, that none of us was in any way badly injured.
Did the United States encourage regional players like Saudi Arabia to become more diplomatically involved in Iraq at that time?
Yes, we did. We did that quite often, and that was a key factor. We wanted this new Iraq, albeit under Shia political control. We wanted it to be well received by its Sunni Arab neighbors.
Mm. So you likely dealt with Nur al-Maliki, and we've talked
Yeah.
already about him. And I'd like, to hear from you, what was your impression of him?
Well, I always try to explain to my fellow Americans that we don't choose these people. I guess you can say that we came close to choosing Maliki a few years before because our ambassador had said he would be a logical person to kind of manage what were always going to be coalition governments. So I did not. I found him there when I got there and found him there when I left.
He wanted to
Uh,
return to power recently, right? Yeah.
yeah, correct. My sense of him at the time was while he had acquaintances and allies who were kind of pro-Iranian, my sense is that he was not someone who was doing the Iranian job for them. He did not have that kind of relationship with Iran. I think to some extent, as the distrust and frankly this I mean the view against him developed in the Western circles because he did not spend a lot of time trying to ingratiate himself with people. If he wanted to say something, he said it very clearly, and it was usually not nice to hear. So I think as that kind of developed, I think more and more people felt that he was the problem in terms of Iran. I don't think he was. I think Iran was a problem when he got there, and Iran was a problem when he left. So
But there's still, strong correlation between his presence and then the Iranian influence expansion in Iraq. And
I
some
would really have I would not really share the view that somehow uh his movement was one that was conducive to Iran. I mean, the Solderists also had Iranian influence in Basra. Uh, a lot of Iranian interest down in Basra. So I think anytime you have a Shia-led government in Iraq that is more concerned about holding on to its own power than necessarily reaching out to other Shia groups or let alone to the Sunni groups, I think you're going to get an Iran that's interested in fishing in troubled waters, if you will. And so I did not see connections between him and, for example, Soleimani,
Mm.
the head of uh, the Iranian presence there. Um, that said, I think if a beleaguered and kind of unpopular leader, you have to remember what was going on in 2009, 2010. Every day there was some electricity shortage that was making life hellacious for people. I mean, to be the heat and no air conditioning, no electricity. So there was a lot of that was kind of the main enemy, the fact that they were not able to get social services well connected there. Um, he was trying to get the oil industry started again. He had difficulty dealing with the Kurds because while the Kurds may not like the Sunnis, they didn't like him either. So
Mm,
I think he had a lot of issues going on, and I'm not sure he would be of the view that the Iranian issue was his number one problem.
sure. So I believe in 2009, Maliki accused Syria for allowing Al Qaeda fighters to cross from Syria to Iraq. In your assessment, who was behind that flaw, Iran or Al Assad?
Well, I don't think Iran had much to do with Sunni Arab fighters from Syria. I think that's a different problem. That has to do with the fact that Syria was beginning to collapse, that whatever Iran was doing to help the Syrian regime was not sufficient to help the Syrian regime. There are a lot of Sunni Arabs, Muslim Brotherhood Arabs, who were very unhappy with Assad. So I'm not sure when Maliki spoke of, and he spoke very poorly of Assad. I don't think it was necessarily in connection with the Iranian presence in the Assad regime. I think it was to the incompetence, if you will, of the Assad regime, and in its inability to manage the internal problems of Syria that had become external problems for Maliki.
So, Saudi writer Abdurrahman al Rashid recently warned that Iraq could become the new Iran, citing attacks on the Gulf states that are planned or launched by groups in Iraq. What do you think of that?
Well, I would be I'd be very skeptical that the Iraqi leadership would be that kind of belligerent force in the Middle East. I think more likely it's the difficulty that any Iraqi leadership has in controlling its own borders within its own borders, and that the essentially the kind of deal that they made to try to bring these Iranian supported militia groups into broader structure into government structures, that may be what he's talking about, because those Iran supported militia groups are not loyal to Baghdad. They're more closely aligned with Tehran. So I think they are a danger. But I would not put it on the basis that Baghdad is going to threaten the Sunni Arab states.
But they're attacking, launching attacks from Iraq on Arab.
Well, they are launching. They are, it's a big country, and if you go out there in the middle of the country, you won't see a lot of law and order there. You'll see tribal chieftains. You'll see all kinds of people, and you'll see Iranian-based militia groups. One theory
I
to
think
deal
it's
with them.
more of a tribal issue more than it's
Yeah, I
regional
hate.
regional
Yeah,
Iranian issue.
yeah. I hate to throw around the word tribal. I mean, inevitably, we all end up using it, but it's essentially to say the civil authorities that were created are weak, and therefore people don't feel protected by the governmental structures, the civil authorities, and so they revert to another line of protection, and that other line of protection is sort of ethnic affiliations, otherwise known by the collective word of
Like,
tribalism.
the all all Arab Gulf states are full of tribes, and tribalism is rooted there, including my country, Saudi Arabia. Um, but we don't see these countries targeting Iraq.
Yeah.
Uh, so the idea is that, like, it doesn't seem to be tribal issue more, but more of a regional issue, or like a Iranian quest for hegemony, and using these groups, sometimes also exploiting identity and sectarianism to
Yeah.
encourage that.
I agree with all of that, and I would suggest that efforts to deal with the Iranian loyalties, I'll call it that, efforts to deal with Iranian loyalties by bringing them into the structures of government are efforts that are going to fail and not lead to more stability. I take your point about Saudi Arabia versus Iraq, but I would be careful not to do too much comparison between apples and oranges because I think they're very different countries with very, very different history. And I think the role of Saddam Hussein from his own seizure of power until he finally lost power was one of somebody who is had very bad relations with just about everybody, including and especially the West. So I think some, how to put it, bad habits in Iraq emerged, and I can see why people think Iraq is really in a difficult circumstance. But that said, I think it's you have to look at where they've come from, how they've kind of managed this, and what they need to do. And I would argue that what they need to do is make sure that Iranian-based groups are not claiming to be part of the governmental structure, because I would have a big concern about their loyalty.
Yeah, honestly, Ambassador Hell, from the portrayal of Iraqi politics and uh, the rise of al-Malki that you gave, one, I would feel that the U.S. administration, the Obama-Biden administration at that time, probably never showed any frustration with the way the country is going, and
Oh,
which
that's
just
not true. That's not true. That's simply not true. I was expressing
that's my
frustration.
impression from the
Well, yeah,
the
no,
way.
you're entitled to your own impression, but you're not entitled to your own facts here. And the reason our vice president made a total of 6 visits, 4 while I was there, that is Vice President Biden, was to make clear to Maliki our concerns about what I've just been talking about, in particular the issues of the Iranian-based militia groups who Iran made no secret that it considered Iraq important to it as kind of a bridge to other Shia groups, especially in Syria and Lebanon, and so they wanted a friendly bridge. And so I think they were very explicit in their efforts to get into the structures. At the same time, Iraq was kind of on flat on its back after Saddam hit. Saddam had done nothing really to develop that country. In fact, he had done things to make it a lot worse, and that's what we're dealing with.
How direct and harsh President Biden was in those meetings, in those visits? He was very sharp and very direct at that time. We know that.
Oh, he was very direct with them. What you don't do is show them up in the newspapers. You don't make public statements, but you make very direct statements in
Do you
private settings.
recall any incidents?
Well, I don't measure progress in terms of incidents, so you'll have to tell me what you mean by that.
Like in terms of an honest conversation that that Vice President Biden had with Iraqi officials.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And they were, there were statements where they barely could smile afterwards. I mean, for the cameras. But the feeling is, look, we'd invaded the country. I think most people would argue that it was not very successful. We got rid of Saddam. That was good, but it was not very successful. So, the idea that we're going to go out there and address the newspapers and criticize the government was not something we felt would be helpful to the situation. I can assure you nobody liked Nouri al-Maliki. Maybe Mrs. Maliki likes Nouri al-Maliki. I don't know anyone else does. I remember talking a lot to Talabani about that. And, the issue, I think the U.S. government was very much interested in seeing what alternative there could be to Maliki.
Yeah.
And whenever they did that, they'd find these, nice guys who look like they're alternatives. But look at Ayad Alawi, impressive guy, spoke English brilliantly, and it was Shia. But Alawi Alawi he never campaigned in the election in the Shia areas.
Yeah.
So it was his Iraqi National Party was really more of a Sunni-based party.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people like that about him because he was much more secular than sectarian, and we wanted secular leaders, not sectarian leaders.
Yes, Ambassador, I want to go back to those meetings out of which American and Iraqi officials leave without smiling to each other.
Yeah.
Would you recall, would you tell us one, a story of one of these meetings, if you don't mind?
Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes they dealt with very specific things like imprisonment of some leader that they said was breaking the law, but we said was Sunni, and our concern that he had to be released from prison. And they would argue with, no, he's not being held because he's Sunni. Many Sunnis out on the streets. It's not that he's Sunni, it's that he's broken the law. And we would not so respectfully argue that, no, we think he's that people like that. We're not talking national figures here, but local figures. So there's a lot of that going on. We also had a lot of difficulty with the Iraqis on the issue of the status of forces agreement. We were not going to leave the U.S. forces in Iraq if they could be arrested and put into Iraqi prisons and tried in Iraqi courts. And we could not reach an agreement with Nuri al-Maliki on that point. And it was a very serious point. And it's ultimately the reason we left.
Did you witness any moments of Vice President Biden when he was visiting Iraq, like getting into clash with Iraqi officials in meetings?
Oh, disagreeing? Yes, of course. Of course. I mean, all these issues I've just discussed were difficult issues. Sometimes Biden would ask that everyone leave the room, and even I left the room, and then he would just talk one-on-one with Maliki because he had to go over some of these tough issues with Maliki. So yeah. This was Maliki. He was chosen by the Iraqis, but I would not say he was our ally in any sense of the word.
Did Biden ever tell you about the content of these,
Of
what
course, all the time. I mean, he would come out of the meeting, we'd sit together in the car, and he'd talk about it. And he would acknowledge that we're dealing with a very tough customer, someone who's not used to listening. So, yeah. No, these are tough, very tough issues. Everyone was counting the days when Maliki would leave. And then the election came up, and there was really no other Sunni, no other Shia was standing. I remember at one point early on, it was a lot of government formation. So you had the Shia parties greatly outnumbered the Sunni parties. But if you looked at his Maliki's Shia party, Law and Justice, or whatever it was called, Shia coalition that he had, they came 2 seats short of the Iraq National Party. And yet the Taliban gave the right of the Shia to try to form a government. Well, rather than go and fight for some Shia voters or Shia leaders, Alawi, went out in the rest of the Sunni Arab states to complain about Maliki and call him a new dictator, etc. At one point, he went to Egypt, and I've heard this from people who are in the meeting, and the Egyptian Hosni Mubarak said, well, if it's so bad as you describe, why are you here in Cairo? Because your problem isn't here in Cairo. Your problem is back in Baghdad. Why are you here telling me about this? You should be back in your country working on this. A rather critical, difficult position taken by the Egyptian leader, but, a valid point. So I think while we didn't accept the idea that Maliki would get a second term, I think many Iraqis had accepted that and were prepared for that, including Talibani, who used to say, "Look, there's a good Maliki and a bad Maliki, and we're not going to get rid of this guy, unfortunately. So he's going to be. We need to appeal to the good Maliki." These are tough issues, very tough issues, and it was not within the American capacity to wag our finger at people and say, "You must select this guy and not that guy." That's something we've done to very how to put it, negative effects around the world.
Well, Ambassador Hill, I'm sure that we wouldn't be able to solve all the Middle Eastern issues in this hour, but I'm really grateful for your time. Thank you so much for joining me on American Dialogues.
Okay, thank you very much.